Welcome to With Creative Company, a podcast where we dive deep in all things business as creatives. We give our personal take on things that actually move the needle and also chat with entrepreneurs about their experiences in running a business. I'm Jordan. I'm Mayme. Let's get creative. Howdy, howdy.
Hello.
Here we are.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today, Jordan?
Today, we are talking about a subject that is really relevant for us, actually, in this season, which is maternity leave / any kind of leave.
Yes.
We want to keep it open for everybody.
So I think we're going to kind of discuss like boundaries and what that looks like for different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will start talking.
Perfect. Because you've been through this once.
Yes.
About to go through it again. I'm going through it for the first time here in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. I've had to take a maternity leave before. I'm taking one again. I also am not a good planner, I think, for when my maternity leaves happen. I'm not good at scheduling a due date or anything. So both of my babies have been due smack dab in the beginning / middle of wedding season for the spring, which means I can't shoot any April weddings or any May weddings or any June weddings. And it is not fun.
Yeah.
That being said, I feel like I learned a lot from my first, and I'm excited to take that into my second. I think we were kind of discussing this before we started recording. In a lot of countries across the world, as a small business owner, your taxes go into a fund that helps the government pay for a maternity or paternity leave, even if you are self-employed. Like a lot of times those are government sponsored instead of job sponsored. In like
That's
a lot
really
of
amazing.
European countries, like, Sweden or Switzerland or all those places, the government is the one sponsoring that leave, and it's like for up to a year. We don't have that in the U.S.
Yeah, definitely not.
Even if you have a job, you're not guaranteed any paid period of time off.
Teachers don't have a maternity leave.
No, every teacher I know has the worst maternity leave situation ever, and it sounds miserable.
It's like insane.
They're like have to ask for donations from other teachers from PTO. It's
literally
bad. So as a small business owner in the U.S., we get stuck with this kind of weird situation for, I guess, total world, whatever, where the taxes that you've paid, you don't have any kind of safety net. So one thing I think we want to discuss in this a lot is I think it's super, super important if you are taking a leave that you take the leave, that you need the time, especially if it's maternity, especially if it's your first baby. You don't know what you're going into. You might have a baby be born and their temperament is like super laid back and they want to sleep all the time, or they'll just let you hold them and sit still. And your experience with that is going to be really different than like my child, who is an extroverted little angel, love her to death. But she's been busy since the moment she was born. So she didn't sleep well. She didn't do well being by herself. And it's not a situation of like, oh, they should have just practiced that more.
Right.
It was her temperament and her personality and just who she is as a person. And it's shining now that she's a toddler. But if I hadn't planned to not be working, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
And not working was hard for me though. So this time I'm actually taking, I feel like, a more balanced approach, which is that instead of taking a full maternity leave, like 3 months off work and then going back full swing, I actually only have about a month off after she's born, a little bit less than a month actually, like 28 days.
Yeah.
And I'm going to shoot one wedding. And then after that, I am continuing the process of like figuring it out, but I'm just going to take a slower pace of total work for the entire year.
Yeah.
So instead of being off work for 3 months completely and being like feeling like a bored out of my mind while also drowning in like lack of sleep.
Right.
What I'm planning to do this time is to slowly move back into work in like a part-time pace.
Yeah.
That way, when I have a 4 or 5 month old and they're still maybe not sleeping well and still need a lot of attention, I'm not then going, well, I'm supposed to be working.
Right.
I'm going to hopefully have the space to do that. Because I feel like for me, being off work straight for 3 months was miserable for my mental health.
Wow.
I needed validation that wasn't my child's survival. I needed to feel like I accomplished something. Like I like to feel like I'm doing something.
Yeah.
So that wasn't great for me. That being said, it also wasn't enough time.
Right. You're like two sides of the coin.
And so that's what I'm doing this time. I'm just putting that out there. That's how I'm structuring it, is that I'm going to take on one project at a time. And my fall wedding schedule is nothing like a normal fall wedding schedule. Purely for the reason that I just think it would be better for me to not try to find a sitter every weekend for 6 months.
And it depends on your situation, right?
Yes.
Everything is so situational. And I think that's like a really good thing to keep in mind when like planning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I started, I guess, because I'm, doing a couple weeks. And I think one of the things that I've really been thankful for that I did is like prepping for that in terms of like communicating with the clients and the people that I'm working with about that.
Yes.
And prepping for that. So like all my like, because again, I'm kind of similar to you in this time where I'm not taking a huge 3-month break after she's born.
Which is not a huge break in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
But yes.
But I guess in the US at least, I feel like it's 8 to 12 weeks is like typical.
12 weeks is pretty typical for the US.
Okay.
So that's why I think we consider it to be like the max.
Right. Yeah. But I'm taking much shorter of a time in terms of like being back to work. But I think I'm going to do something similar, which is not like fully back into it, expecting myself to work 5 days a week plus shooting on the weekends. Like I'm definitely trying to set those boundaries up. But with that being said, I do have a husband who works from home.
Yes.
So I think implementing things like I'm working this day, you're watching the baby this day, or the first half of the day is yours and then opposite, like implementing that.
Yes.
And also my parents. I mean, I have really nice built-in babysitters that live just right down the road that I'm sure will be super helpful. But back to the more technical things of like, my meetings are already scheduled for when I need to come back. Like all of the things that I may have done during exactly kind of that time where we're giving birth or just like, a few weeks after, I've already done that in preparation. And I think that's really helped me feel less stressful about taking that time off.
Yes.
Which is nice.
No, I think that's an important thing when you're preparing for any kind of leave, whether that's like you're getting married and you need a whole month off of work, or you're having a maternity leave or any other kind of leave. Prepping your clients is such a big deal, and understanding your situation. Like you and I have completely different maternity situations in the sense that you and Seth own a business together. It's the only income you have.
Yeah.
So you have to make decisions around that, but you also get to both be here all the time.
Yeah.
And, and I'm sure you're going to look at it differently once the baby arrives than you do now. Like you might be like, oh, one of us being on all day isn't going to work, or a few hours, but maybe that person's the default parent. So they're handling most things for a few hours. Like that can be a setup that would work really well for some people. And then on the opposite end, my husband can have long periods of time off work. We're really, really excited because he's actually scheduled to be off for this baby. The band that he works for is going to be off the road for the period of time. We didn't plan it. It's exciting. That being said, like that means we're going to have no income.
Right. Because that's the other downside one downside of working for yourself.
Yes.
If you're not working, you're not making money.
So we have to strategically plan.
Right.
And we are. It just, sometimes it can be a little disheartening because you're like, why does it feel like we have no money? Oh,
because you're saving it.
Because we're having to be off work for a month in this busy season for both of our jobs. And that's okay. But simultaneously, when he goes back to work, he's gone like 35 to 40% of the week, which is really awesome. It's a very manageable schedule for us, but it gets hard when we hit busy season. And like if he worked a 9-to-5 job, I could be like, great, you're watching the kids on the weekend while I go shoot events.
Right.
And that would be a nice balance to have there, but we don't have that. So if I have to shoot a wedding or an event or anything, it's like, well, I have to go find childcare for this.
Yeah.
And that can get really overwhelming when your babies are little.
Right.
So that's why this time I'm planning a little differently. I'm willing to slow down for the time period that I need to, for the sake of my mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
Because fall when our first daughter was born, my first fall back, I shot like a lot of weddings. I second shot a lot. I was doing a lot of other stuff. And I was like in tears every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just hoping to avoid that this time around.
Yeah.
And then on prepping your clients, I think what you've done is so wise. I think sometimes we have this attitude of like, well, I'll just push it all. But really, I think for your clients to be well prepared, the main goal in prepping for a leave is that you pull everything forward to you.
Yep.
Then you take the leave.
Yeah. 100%.
So if you have things due, don't deliver them late, deliver them early.
Yep.
Don't schedule your meetings for after the leave, schedule them for before.
Yeah, exactly. Payment reminders, timeline, you know what I mean? Like everything. Because it's just going to make it less stressful.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I've tried to do at least, because that's all I can do at this point until she gets here.
How do you feel like you are like mentally preparing for the fact that your work schedule might change? Because I feel like if you're creative and you're having some kind of leave, it doesn't always mean that you're 100% off work. Like we've just said,
right.
It just doesn't always work that way. When you don't have guaranteed income, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I encourage people to like live as low as they can so that they can actually have the time they need. But like that doesn't always work.
Right.
Do you feel like you're doing any like mental prep for like, I typically work these ways and now I have to do this other way?
Yeah. I think it's a work in progress.
Okay.
Because I've never been through it. So I think that's like one of the biggest thing I've done is try to keep an open mind for the change, for the unknown. Mm-hmm. Someone gave us some advice and they were like, just know that you're going to go through things that you don't like, just the unknown. Yeah. And it's kind of silly to be like, oh, prepare for the unknown, because how do you do that, right?
Yeah.
But I think keeping an open mind and realizing that there will be unknowns and that's part of the process and that's okay has been a huge thing for me. I'm a planner. I like to prepare. I like to do all of those things in kind of every aspect of my life, whether it be food, business, things like that. But really kind of just trying to shift my mindset of like, okay, there are going to be some hard days. There are going to be things that you don't know how to deal with or whatever. I feel like I've been really good. I'm thankful that I have a community of people who are similar in the sense of like running their own business around me, who are also mothers. So this entire time I have been asking everyone I know that's a mother that also is a business owner, just advice.
Has that been hard because you get like opposite advice from people, or do you feel like it all lines up pretty well?
I feel like it lines up for the most part pretty well. Because we're in a similar boat.
Yeah.
And I think people's approaches can be somewhat differently, but I think it's like the core, like just advice that people have given has been kind of the same. And it is more along the lines of like the unknown and being able to be flexible, and what that looks like. And I think too, like as a business owner, I've been very independent and like I can do everything and I can, like there's just something which I'm really proud of, right?
Yes.
Like that's something that I think is great. And I've already started to kind of be the one that's like asking for more help or things like that. So I'm just trying to keep an open mind of like understanding that I may not be 100% back at work or 100% myself. But still showing up. Yeah. And I think one of the advice that we've gotten from a previous interview with Ashley was you need to decide what you're going to be for that day or for that hour, right? Let's like break it down even more. Are you going to be the person that's responding to all your emails in that hour? Or are you going to be playing with your child or giving attention to your child or doing tummy time or whatever it is, right? Or are you going to take a nap while they're taking a nap because you need it? So I think going back to that, okay, deciding, even if it's for 15 minutes, like, I don't know. I just think that it could work really well. And I'm going to try to implement that is deciding what you're going to do and that be the focus. Like really just trying to keep the distractions at a bare minimum. Yeah.
Well,
and deciding what I'm going to do.
And I think a lot of times we have this mindset that like being a mom is going to detract from your ability to be a business owner. And I think in the short term, it feels like that. But I think in the long term, I'm a much better business owner now than I was because I'm so much better at using my time.
Yes.
Like pre our daughter being born, I worked so much. Now I do less work now. I've been very upfront about that. Like we would be dead without my husband's income. Like I do make money. It is necessary for our survival, but it's not as much as I made previously because the cost of us paying for full-time childcare would just totally negate that.
Yeah. Right. I mean, absolutely.
So it's like a balance of like I work, but we've adjusted my work schedule. That being said, like I used to work so much during the day. If I had a free day, I was up late at night. I was just constantly working, and I don't feel like I had good boundaries on when I was or wasn't working. As soon as my daughter was born, rather than taking that approach, which I think is awesome, and I think sometimes I should have implemented it better because I would try to be letting Brendan be full-blown parent mode while I worked from home. I can't do that. I cannot not be full-blown mom mode if I'm home.
Yeah.
My brain doesn't work that way.
But that's great that you know that.
So, but what I've had to do now is like I have had to learn how to work in short increments. And when she was first born, that was misery for me. Like I'd put her down and I would only get 30 minutes of work done and I would feel like I had failed because it was only 30 minutes. And now at this point, I'm like, great, I did 30 minutes of work.
That's 30 minutes.
And I got a lot done in that 30 minutes or whatever it was. So I don't work if she's awake and if we're in the middle of any kind of like interactions with her. Also because my job is so computer heavy if I'm at home. Bringing her to a session when I'm older, I will totally do that not when I'm older. Well,
you'll also
when we both are. I would totally be willing to do that. I think that could be a good experience for her. But me just sitting on my laptop trying to work while she's awake.
Right.
It fails so poorly.
Especially at her age. I mean, she's probably enamored with screens, anytime they come out. So
And I am baffled by how quickly she can reset a Lightroom catalog page with like one slap of the keyboard.
Right.
The overrides that she knows.
Astounding.
I've lost hours before.
Right.
What I'm trying to say though is that like now, because of that, I can work in these tiny fractions of time better than I ever would have been able to.
Yeah.
I can look at my week and know when I have to work and when I don't. I don't procrastinate projects like I used to. I'm much better at being like, I have to do this. And I'm also way better at giving myself rest.
That's amazing.
Because I used to work 20 hours a week for a corporate company and also run my business. And I would basically work like 8 to 5 and then 5 to 10 because Brendan wasn't home. And now it's like, if I am solo parenting, I will not work in naps or at night. If I have energy, like if I feel like I'm very energized that day, which I was starting to feel like right until I got pregnant with the second, I was starting to feel a little more capable.
Yeah.
I will pick one.
Right.
I won't do both.
That's
so
amazing,
I either
though.
get nap off or I get night off. And I'm going to pick one because I need it.
Yeah.
And then even if I can only go to a coffee shop for 2 hours, I edit galleries way faster than I did before I was a mom. And it's just because it's the only option I have.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to see where these skills of like decision making and speed and understanding time and importance and value, all of those things, I'm excited to see where they can take me when my children are older.
Yeah.
And they don't need quite so much undivided attention, or they're in school and I'm not with them all day, every day. But for the next, we're about to have another baby in May. For the next 4 years, I'm okay with that not being my case.
Yeah.
And that's
that is
fine.
such a cool way to look at it, though. It's like making you be a better business owner.
Yes.
Because you're honing in on those skills. And I think that's a good way you could also start preparing is like setting the timer for 30 minutes.
Yes.
And being all right. Like, let's see what I can get done.
Yes.
Or maybe setting goals of like, hey, I want to write 3 Instagram posts in 30 minutes and see how that goes. Like those skills in preparation for that time is,
And setting boundaries with yourself. I think I told you this. A huge regret that I had early on is that I think I spent every single time I was sitting like in her room trying to get her to sleep because newborns nap 50 times a day for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
At least mine did. I would just sit on my phone.
Right. Yeah, you gave me that advice. You were like, don't do this.
It was horrible for my mental, like I cannot explain how bad it was for my mental health to spend that much time on a screen. So now what I do, granted she has way less naps per day. I did get a Kindle. I think you have one as well.
Yeah.
Support that. I did that in the middle of the night with her as she got a little older and I was still having to wake up at night. I would read and that was amazing.
Yeah.
But during the day, what I do now is for her nap, I do not bring my phone in the room. I'm 100% present on just like holding her and being with her because 50 years ago, you wouldn't have had that kind of distraction of like a phone. You wouldn't have had that ability. And I think I want to have those memories of being with her. But at night for her bedtime, I'll bring my phone with me and I'll knock out some of the stuff that I couldn't do during the day where I would have like been scrolling and then doing something productive.
Right.
I will knock out some of those things, whether it's an Amazon order or if it's answering text messages or sometimes even drafting an email. I will use that period of time at night to get those things done.
Yeah.
And it keeps me off Instagram.
It's amazing.
Versus the first 6 months of her life, I just spent like 7 hours a day on Instagram. And then was like, well, I can't even answer text messages. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Well, it's because I wasn't used to it.
I feel like that's another thing too that I'm going to implement is like utilizing the tools on your phone or your computer of like, I do this already, is like at a certain time of night, my phone goes on sleep mode.
Yes.
And
it's every time I text you, you are always on silence.
That's me. Which is great for someone who I think is a personality thing, but also a business owner of like when you see your phone light up, you're like, is that an email? Is that a client texting me? Like, so I utilize that and I plan to utilize that more during those, and you can customize it to any time you want, right? You can have that. And I think even like I'm going to turn my email off on my phone for a little while, for a couple of weeks, just so I'm not even thinking about that.
I think that's really
creating
wise.
That boundary of like, hey, for this time, I'm not going to do that because guess what? It's an email and it's going to be there and I'm going to see it and I'm going to respond to it when I can.
Yes.
So I think little steps like that are going to be useful too.
And if you're someone who's really into strategy, and I think we've talked about this in our communications where I was talking about boundaries with like communication between clients. If you're very into business strategy, one thing I do is for initial interactions with clients now, I do not respond to anything they send me immediately.
Yeah.
And it's not out of lack of interest, but I also do not just forget about it. I learned very quickly that with mom brain, the amount of things I used to be able to keep track of in my brain, out the window.
Right.
I have to write everything down. So what I will do is if someone is texting me or emailing me and we've just started conversing, I will set a reminder for 12 to 24 hours later, depending on what it is. And I will respond to them then. If it's a text, it might be less time than that. It might be 6 hours. I've set a reminder and it's like for Fawn's bedtime. When I'm sitting on my phone, that's when I'm going to respond to that.
Right.
That's for two reasons. A, so I don't have to get stressed out by her because, man, me trying to do anything, like is immediately as soon as I try to become productive, she knows and her world falls apart. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what my husband does.
Right.
I can be packing a camera gear bag and he can be like the best dad ever. And she is laying on the ground sobbing because I'm packing a bag. And that's okay. But like it keeps those things from happening. But the strategy of it is from that beginning initial interaction, they know what to expect from my responses. So then when I don't respond for a few hours because I actually am busy later on in that relationship, they're not bothered.
Yeah.
And Brendan and I actually had a conversation about this last week because someone had sent me an email and we had talked about it. And then he was like, you haven't replied to that yet? And it was like the next morning. And I was like, I'm typing my email response right now. He was like, I can't. I might let a text sit for like 45 minutes and I feel rude. And I was like, I will not let a text sit for like 7 days if it's business related.
Right.
But people need to know that I'm a mom.
Right. And also, we're not attached to our phones.
Yeah. So if you really are into like having a strategy, I would say for anybody, like set up whatever boundary you want to have and start your interactions that way.
Yeah.
So if you have a client and you want them to know that you don't respond immediately, make sure you respond timely, make sure that you stay interested, but give yourself some space and see what happens. Because people typically aren't that bothered by it.
Right.
Especially people in our age range.
Yeah.
I think sometimes if you're talking to someone who's like older, like 50s and up, they are going to maybe circle back to you faster and be like, hey, did you see this text? But people in our age range, we know what's up. We don't care.
Right.
It's okay.
Right. And I think it's just so important to have those boundaries, whether or not you're going on maternity leave or not.
Yes.
Like that is a skill you can absolutely practice that will be very utilized and helpful later on.
Do you think how is Seth preparing to be a stay-at-home working parent as well?
I think he's right now just focusing on wrapping everything up.
You guys have so much going on.
Yeah, he's got the fall wedding season due dates are coming in real hard. But I think he's incredibly well already at being just very present in the moment in what he's doing.
Yes.
So I feel like he already has that inherent skill that is going to be really useful. And he is really has just gone leaps and bounds of motivation and staying on track, especially with editing, because sometimes it can get just tedious of sitting in front of a computer screen all day and not feeling inspired or whatever. But yeah, I think he is, just like I said, so good at being present in the moment in what he's doing, that's just going to serve him so well when it comes to baby time.
I will also say, so if we're staying on the topic of maternity leave, my two other things that I would just tell people randomly is sleep is a big deal. You need sleep. If you're not sleeping, don't expect yourself to get a lot done. Don't expect yourself to feel better. But also if you're in the opportunity where you guys can split sleep in any way, I would encourage that. Whether that means that one of you is the person that's up all night and the other person knows it's their job to let that person sleep in. It took Brennan and I a while to figure that out. That our days would go better if I slept in, if I had been up all night with her.
Right.
And his not being up was not him. It was a her thing. She's been a mommy's girl since birth. And so she just, she accepts support from me a lot better. I think with baby number 2, we're going to try a little better to split it. We're going to see how that goes. But I think just respecting the human need for sleep and whatever amount that is that you need to be able to basically function, just respect it.
Yeah.
And make sure your partner understands that it's important to you.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes from the outside, it's well, I wasn't up all night, so I don't even know what that felt like. And then the other thing I was going to say, I have totally forgotten, so give me 2 seconds.
No, that's okay, because I have something to say with that.
Great.
I think something that's important that I'm learning stepping into motherhood, but also in my relationship with my husband, in my relationship with my friends or my family, is and I think it happens to women a lot more, is that you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others, in order to be the best version of yourself. Whether that be, for your husband or for your children or for your family, that is something that I think women in general have in society have been told of, everybody else goes before them. And then it's them. And I think it's nice to be a part of this day and age where that is starting to reverse. People are starting to talk about and realize more that I will be a better business owner, mother, wife, daughter, whatever, when I feel my cup is full and you can give from that full cup instead of just keeping to give from empty, right? You're just not going to be your best. And I think that is something that I have learned over the past 2 years really well. And it's a process. I'm not perfect at it 100%, because some people are, more people pleasers. I'm an Enneagram 2. And if you understand that, you know what I mean? It's just kind of one of those things. And my mom is very giving and my mom is a servant, and helps everybody. And so it's learning that I think is going to be really, really important for motherhood as well. And what that looks like for me. And I think sleep has become one of those things that I really didn't think I needed, or I just didn't sleep a lot or whatever. And now it's a huge thing. Working out has become huge for me too. Not only physically, but mentally as well. It gives you that break. I'm usually not on my phone when I work out, so it's a great break from that. And I usually either try to listen to a podcast or maybe some music that's really inspiring. And so I don't know. I just think that goes along with that, is making sure you're taken care of. as well. And it's not selfish. I
No.
think people think it's selfish, but
I think people think it's selfish, or if you're like me, honestly, sometimes it felt like it was too overwhelming. Like I felt like people were saying, take care of myself. And that was hard for me because I was like, well, that's just another thing I'm being expected to do.
right.
And that actually leads me back to, I did some counseling last year. I did some CBT, like counseling for postpartum depression, which honestly, it was sleep deprivation. Like I had a little bit of postpartum depression, but as soon as someone started sleeping better, I was good. I have high sleep needs. It was not a lack of support. It's like, in order to function, I need 10 to 12 hours of sleep.
Yeah. It's the part of the 3. It's nutrition, sleep, and mindset. But that's like your life.
But it was literally like, if I'm not pregnant, I need 8 to 10 hours. And if I am pregnant, I need like 10 to 12 hours of sleep. And that's a high goal when you have a kid.
Right.
Especially when you have a kid with lower sleep needs who sleeps like 10 hours a night. Like, anyway, I digress. 2 things that my counselor really reminded me of is, one is that like that taking care of yourself does not have to be what other people are saying.
Yeah.
Like if for me at the moment, the concept of just working out sounded like death because that was another thing I had to go accomplish and do. It was like, well, maybe it's just not having your phone with when you're putting Fawn down for a nap. Yeah. Maybe it's just giving yourself time where your brain is off.
You're reading a book.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was just connecting with things that I wanted to be doing. And that was helpful. And then the other thing that was really interesting for me that sounds so simple was I have a very involved husband. He's phenomenal and amazing. Like he's a huge blessing to my life. And I actually sometimes feel like I take that for granted because you see so much stuff online where people are like hating on their husband. And there's like this temptation when you're a mom because you inherently do have to do more.
Right.
Especially when you're choosing to do things like breastfeed or be the default parent because the other person works. You inherently have to do more parent work.
Yeah.
And honestly, until very recently, I was constantly begrudged that he didn't do enough, even though he's out here doing all that he could do. And I only recently have given him that grace. At the same time, I would step in if he was doing bedtime early on with Fawn when she was younger and she honestly could have dealt with him doing bedtime. I would step in because of the crying and I couldn't do it. And one thing my counselor told me is like, would you want anyone to step in for you?
Ooh.
Or would you think that you just had to suffer through it? And I was like, well, I just have to do it. And she was like, okay, so he's the other parent. Why does anyone have to step in for him? Like, why does anyone have to keep her from crying for him? And I was like, well, he doesn't deserve that. And she was like,
you don't either.
But if she was crying and he wasn't home, you're the only one that would deal with it.
Yeah.
And she was like, you have to give him space to be a parent. And it made a huge difference. Like, and even now, sometimes it's really hard when she wants me or something and I'm trying to be productive, like clean our house or something.
Yeah.
And she's upset about it and I have to give him space to just suffer through it. And he doesn't complain. It's not him that's the issue, it's me.
Yeah.
And I think I'm excited with baby number 2 that we have learned that lesson and hopefully can learn it earlier, because I think I would be less of the default parent right now, potentially, had I not constantly stepped in until she was like 10 months old and been like, okay, just quit doing bedtime. I'll just take her. And now I have a toddler who is like, well, you're the only person who does this thing. And she's just now getting old enough where she's flexible again. There's like a stage of flexibility that I missed. And now we're finally getting into another one, which is great.
Yeah.
But for a little while, I mean, it was like misery because it was only mom that had done stuff. So anyway, I'm really grateful that my counselor put that in my mind of like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why aren't you letting him be an adult when you know he can be and you know he wants to be? He's not trying to not be helpful.
Right. You're not allowing him.
Yes. And that was a huge gift.
It's so, I think women in general, but again, back to like being a business owner, it's like just what you're used to doing.
Yes.
Right? Because who else is going to do it?
And again, when you see this narrative online that men are useless and they don't want to be parents, and then you're married to someone who's really putting in effort, somehow your brain tricks you into thinking that you're these other people, and you're not. And you have to give the spouse grace of like, they're doing a lot of work. Sometimes they're not, but in my case, they are.
Right. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, it really does. I think that's such a great conversation. I'm really glad we talked about this because
for sure.
I think it's important. And I think that's all I have to say. Do you have anything else?
No,
to
I
wrap
think
up?
so. I think
So set those boundaries, take that time, ask for help.
have grace.
Have grace.
So much grace on yourself and just
in your partner.
and be prepared to be slow.
And be prepared to be slow.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You can watch this on YouTube,
Yes.
Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Yep.
All the things. What's our handle, Mayme?
With.creative company on Instagram. And I think everything else is just with creative company.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
yeah.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Have a great week.
Bye.